The rain was steady that night, drumming against the kitchen window as I stared at the papers spread before me. Bank statements, signatures, transactions that didn't make sense. My daughter's name gleamed in black ink, over and over, like a wound that wouldn't close. My throat tightened, the clock ticking louder with every heartbeat, every realization that this betrayal wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate. If you've ever trusted the wrong person, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from, because sometimes the knife comes from the hand you once held the tightest. That was the night my world cracked open, one silent heartbeat at a time. Let me show you how it all began. It was a Thursday evening around 7:15 p.m. I remember because we just sat down for dinner. My son, his wife, and me. The smell of roast chicken filled the kitchen, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to peace. Then my phone buzzed. I almost didn't answer it, but something in my chest told me to. It was my house cleaner, her voice shaking, words tumbling so fast I could barely catch them. She said there was someone inside my home. I froze, my fork still in my hand. For a split second, I thought she must have been mistaken. We live in a quiet neighborhood where nothing ever really happens. But then she said something that made my heart drop completely. The person wasn't a stranger. She described the woman, her clothes, her hair, and my world started spinning. It couldn't be. It had to be a mistake. But deep down, I knew. There's a kind of dread that doesn't need confirmation. It just settles in your stomach like a cold stone. My daughter, Emily, my only daughter. She was inside my home, going through my things, as if I were already gone. I remember my son asking what was wrong, but the words wouldn't come. My ears rang, my hands trembled. I felt torn in half. Half of me wanted to rush home, and the other half couldn't bear to see what I'd find. How do you prepare yourself to face betrayal from your own child? That night, something broke inside me. The woman who believed her family would never turn against her disappeared in that moment, and the woman who replaced her, she's the one telling you this story now. Because before you can understand what happened that night, you need to know how we got there. How love, trust, and family began to unravel long before that call ever came. After that phone call, I sat in silence for a long time, trying to make sense of how we had gotten here. It's strange how a single moment of chaos can make the past suddenly come into focus. Looking back now, I can see it so clearly. The cracks were there long before that night. When my husband passed away 6 years ago, something in our family shifted. He had always been the bridge between all of us, the calm in the storm. Without him, everything felt off balance. My son, Mark, tried to stay strong, visiting when he could, helping with the house. But my daughter, Laura, she pulled away. At first, I thought it was just grief. She was always sensitive, the kind of person who felt everything deeply. But over time, it became something else, a quiet resentment I couldn't quite reach. She started asking questions I didn't expect. Gentle at first, about bills, my will, the insurance money. I told myself she was just worried, that it was her way of caring. But looking back, I realized there was something colder beneath it. The way her tone changed when she asked about the house. The way she would bring up how tired I looked. how maybe I needed someone to take over things. I wanted to believe she meant well. That's what mothers do. We look for the best in our children, even when the truth is whispering something else. There were signs everywhere. But love has a way of blinding you. Every uneasy glance, every unfinished conversation was a warning I ignored. I thought if I just loved her enough, she'd come back to me, the way she was before. Now I see that the betrayal didn't begin that night. It had been building quietly for years. And as I sat there listening to the sound of my house being broken into, I realized this wasn't just about money or property. It was about something far deeper, a bond between a mother and daughter that had already been breaking long before the locks ever turned. The drive home felt endless, even though it couldn't have been more than 10 minutes. My son was gripping the steering wheel so tightly I could hear the leather creak. I remember staring out the window, watching the streetlights blur into streaks of gold and white. My heart pounding so hard it hurt. I wanted to tell myself there had been a mistake, that maybe my daughter was there for some innocent reason. But deep down, I knew what we were about to walk into. When we turned the corner, the sight hit me like a physical blow. A moving truck was parked halfway up the driveway, its back doors open, boxes stacked inside. My boxes, my furniture, my life. The front door stood wide open, spilling light across the lawn, and there she was, my daughter, standing in the middle of it all like she belonged there. Her expression calm, almost distant, as if she were rearranging her own home. For a moment, I couldn't move. I could see my wedding photo sticking out of one of the boxes, the frame tilted sideways. The clock that used to hang in our kitchen, the one that always ran 5 minutes fast because my husband said it kept him punctual, that too was being carried away. Each item felt like a piece of my soul being lifted and packed away without permission. I wanted to scream, to ask her why, but my voice failed me. I just stood there, frozen between fury and heartbreak. She looked at me once, just once, and there was something in her eyes I'll never forget. Not guilt, not fear, just finality. Like she'd already made peace with what she was doing. The sound of sirens cut through the night. Red and blue lights washed over the walls of the house, over her face, over mine. My son stepped forward, but I held him back. This wasn't just about stolen things. It was about the moment a mother realizes her child no longer sees her as family, only as something to take from. I felt the air leave my lungs as the officers approached, their voices muffled under the roar of my thoughts. This was it. The moment everything I believed about love and family unraveled completely. And as the lights flashed against the windows of the home I once built, I understood this wasn't the end of a bad night. It was the beginning of something far worse. The flashing red and blue lights painted my front yard in waves of color, as if the world itself couldn't decide whether this moment was real or not. I stood on the porch, numb, while 2 officers moved between me and my daughter. They spoke calmly, their voices clipped but professional, trying to make sense of the chaos before them. I could barely hear them over the pounding in my ears. I remember one of them asking who owned the house. The words hit harder than I expected. To think I would ever have to prove that the home my husband and I built, brick by brick, year by year, was truly mine. I walked to my car and retrieved the folder I kept in the glove box. Deed, ID, utility bills. My life reduced to pieces of paper meant to validate my place in the world. I handed them over with trembling hands. When they turned toward my daughter, she stood tall, arms crossed, eyes dry. Her voice was steady, almost rehearsed. I couldn't understand how she could look so calm while everything between us burned down to ashes. Behind her, I caught sight of her 2 children standing near the truck. My grandchildren, their small faces pale and confused. That image will never leave me. They didn't understand what was happening, only that something sacred had been broken. The officer's questions grew sharper. My daughter's story began to crumble under the weight of facts, documents, and truth. I watched it happen like a slow unraveling. A thread pulled until everything came apart, and as the realization settled in her eyes, the anger came next. Not the kind that shouts, but the kind that freezes. That moment, I knew I'd lost her, at least for now. I wanted to run to her, to tell her it didn't have to be this way. But I couldn't. Love doesn't mean surrendering to destruction. Sometimes love means standing still, even as it breaks you, so the rest of your family has a chance to heal. As they led her away toward the patrol car, I felt both hollow and grounded at once. The home was mine again, but the cost was unbearable. That night, I learned a truth I had always resisted. Love without boundaries can destroy as surely as hate. And though the flashing lights faded into the distance, I knew this was far from over. The law could handle the paperwork, but I would have to live with the consequences of my choice. The morning after the arrest was unbearably quiet. The house felt unfamiliar, hollow. Every sound echoed. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the kitchen clock. It was the same home I'd lived in for decades, but now it carried an emptiness I couldn't touch. I sat at the dining table, surrounded by scattered paperwork the officers had left behind. Reports, statements, forms that reduced a lifetime of love and heartbreak into boxes to be checked and signatures to be written. When they asked me whether I wanted to press charges, I hesitated. My first instinct was to protect her, to make this go away somehow, to pretend it had never happened. But pretending was what had brought us here in the first place. I realized that love without accountability isn't love, it's surrender. So, with shaking hands, I signed my name. Each letter felt like another fracture in my heart. The days that followed blurred together. Court dates, phone calls, endless questions. I avoided the mirror because I couldn't stand the look in my own eyes. I told myself I was doing the right thing, that my daughter needed help, that maybe this was the only way to save her from herself. But every night, I lay awake wondering if she hated me now, if she'd ever understand why I couldn't protect her this time. Then came the children, my grandchildren, suddenly without a home. I remember holding them that first night, their small bodies trembling against mine, asking when their mother was coming back. I couldn't answer. I just held them tighter and promised silently that they would never feel abandoned. Not again. Taking them in wasn't a choice. It was instinct. Something that rose from the same place that once loved their mother without question. But as I tucked them into bed, surrounded by the quiet hum of a home trying to heal, I felt something new stir inside me. Not peace, not yet, but purpose. This wasn't the life I planned, but it was the one I had. And as I looked at their sleeping faces, I realized that maybe love, when tested by fire, doesn't disappear. It just finds a new form. This was the beginning of mine. The first week felt like stepping into someone else's life. My mornings began before sunrise, with the sound of cartoons blaring and cereal spilling across the counter. My once quiet house, where every footstep used to echo, was suddenly alive with laughter, questions, and small, chaotic footsteps. I forgot how loud childhood could be, and how healing that sound could feel. The days blurred into a rhythm I hadn't known in years, packing lunches, finding missing shoes, learning to braid hair with clumsy fingers. I rediscovered the kind of patience I thought had left me long ago, tucked away with the boxes of old toys I'd stored in the attic. Every night, I collapsed into bed exhausted, but it was a good kind of tired, the kind that came from giving instead of grieving. There were moments that cut deep, though. One evening, as I tucked the youngest into bed, she asked when her mother was coming home. Her eyes were so trusting, so hopeful, and for a heartbeat I wanted to lie, to promise that everything would be okay soon. But I couldn't. I just brushed her hair back and whispered something about how love sometimes needs time to heal. When she fell asleep, I sat there in the dim light, feeling the weight of both truth and mercy pressing on my chest. Slowly, the house began to change. The silence that once haunted every corner was replaced by music, laughter, and the steady heartbeat of routine. We planted flowers in the backyard, turned my husband's old office into a playroom, and hung drawings on the refrigerator where unpaid bills used to sit. One of them was a crayon picture of me holding hands with the kids under a big yellow sun. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Some nights, after they're asleep, I sit on the porch and listen to the crickets. I think about how love finds a way to rebuild, even after everything has fallen apart. I used to believe healing came from forgiveness or closure. But now, I think it comes from caring for someone who needs you more than you need answers. For the first time in a long while, the house feels like a home again. Still, deep down, there's a quiet unease, like a shadow that hasn't quite lifted. I can feel it, waiting, because every story has another truth buried beneath it, and I know ours hasn't finished revealing itself yet. For a while, life felt calm again. Mornings were predictable, the smell of pancakes, the rustle of backpacks, the sound of little feet running through the hallway. The chaos of parenthood had turned into something soft and steady. I almost let myself believe that peace had finally found us. Then came the call. It was from a detective, his voice polite but heavy. He said there were new details about my daughter's case, things they hadn't known before. I remember gripping the counter, the world narrowing around his words. He spoke about financial trails, about missing funds, about the months before the break-in. But it wasn't just about greed, it was about desperation, addiction. My daughter had been drowning, and none of us had seen it. After I hung up, I sat there for a long time, unable to move. The truth came in pieces, like shards of glass, small, sharp, and impossible to hold without bleeding. I thought back to all the little signs I'd ignored: the sudden withdrawals, her unpredictable moods, the way she avoided my eyes when I asked if she was okay. I had wanted so badly to believe she was just angry, just lost. But she had been sick, fighting a battle I never knew how to see. At first, I felt betrayed all over again, then guilty, then unbearably sad. Anger tangled with pity, heartbreak folded into love. How do you reconcile the image of your child, the baby you once held, the girl who used to leave you notes on the fridge, with the woman who stole from you because she couldn't face her own pain? I realized then that understanding doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't undo the nights I cried myself to sleep, or the look in her children's eyes when they asked about her. But it does make the world less black and white. It reminds me that even good people, even loved ones, can break when the weight becomes too much. That night, after putting the kids to bed, I sat by the window and watched the streetlights flicker against the glass. For the first time, I didn't feel only anger. I felt sorrow for both of us. Maybe forgiveness isn't something you give all at once. Maybe it comes in quiet moments like that, when you stop asking why and start wishing the other person had just asked for help. I don't know when I'll be ready to forgive her completely, but I do know this. I still love her, and love, even after everything, is where healing begins. It's been almost a year now. The seasons have passed quietly, one after another, and my days have settled into a rhythm I never expected but have come to cherish. The mornings begin with the soft sound of the kids getting ready for school. The laughter, the forgotten lunchbox, the little arms that still reach for me when they're tired. My home feels full again, not because everything is perfect, but because love has found new ways to live here. I had almost stopped thinking about the day I would hear from her again. But one afternoon, a letter came, her handwriting shaky, the paper creased from being folded too many times. My heart pounded just seeing her name. I sat there for a long while before I opened it, afraid of what it might say, or worse, what it might make me feel. She wrote about treatment, about the meetings she was attending, about learning how to face herself without hiding behind anger or blame. She said she was sorry, not in the careless way people say it to ease guilt, but in the quiet way that comes from finally understanding the damage done. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She just hoped that one day, I'd be able to remember her as more than the worst thing she'd ever done. Reading that letter broke something in me, and healed something else at the same time. I realized I'd been carrying my pain like proof of what she did, afraid that letting it go would mean it didn't matter. But forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of what can't be changed. A few months later, I agreed to visit her. It wasn't dramatic. No tears, no shouting. Just two women sitting across from each other, mother and daughter, both older, both broken in ways they didn't expect to be. I saw in her eyes the girl I used to know, buried under years of hurt. We didn't fix everything that day, but we started something, a beginning, small and fragile, but real. Now, when I watch the kids playing in the yard as the sun dips low and the sky turns gold, I think about how strange it is that love can survive even after being shattered. It changes shape, it quiets down, but it doesn't die. Maybe that's what redemption really is, not the undoing of the past, but the decision to keep loving despite it. If you've ever been hurt by someone you love, or struggled to forgive, I want you to know, healing doesn't come all at once. It comes slowly, in moments, in letters, in small acts of grace. Sometimes, it's not about waiting for the other person to change, it's about letting yourself breathe again. Have you ever faced that kind of choice to forgive, even when it still hurts? Tell me in the comments. I read everyone. It started on an ordinary Thursday night. The kind of quiet evening that feels safe, routine, until it isn't. I was sitting at the kitchen table, sorting through bills and paperwork like I always do. The clock ticking softly in the background. The house was still, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the rain tapping against the window. I remember reaching for the folder that held my bank statements. The same folder I'd kept in the drawer by the phone since my husband passed. It should have been simple. Just numbers. Just proof that life was steady. But it wasn't steady anymore. I saw the withdrawals first, then the transfers, and then the name. My daughter's name. My only daughter. My heart stopped for a moment as I traced the numbers, the pattern, the slow bleed from my account over months. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe a bank error, maybe some misunderstanding. But deep down, I already knew. I'd trusted her with everything, even my passwords. She'd said she was helping me organize things, making sure I didn't get lost in the paperwork like Dad used to. I believed her. Because she was my child. Because mothers are supposed to. I sat there staring at the papers while the rain grew heavier. Every sound in the house suddenly felt louder. The creak of the floor, the ticking of the clock, the echo of my own breath. I remembered Christmas mornings when she'd laugh until her eyes watered. The day she told me she wanted to be just like me when she grew up. I remembered the way she used to call every night after her father died, just to make sure I wasn't lonely. That girl. She wouldn't have done this. But the woman she became, the one I didn't want to see changing, did. The realization sank in like ice. Betrayal doesn't come all at once. It seeps in, piece by piece, until you can't tell when trust became blindness. I felt foolish, like I'd handed her the knife myself. The hurt wasn't about the money. It was about the love that had been used as a weapon. The kindness that had been twisted into something cruel. I stayed at that table until midnight, staring at those papers, feeling the world shift beneath me. There's a kind of silence that only comes after the truth breaks you open. It's not loud. It's hollow. I felt that silence sitting in my chest. I don't know when I stopped crying. Only that by the time the clock struck 2:30, something inside me had hardened. I wasn't sure what came next. Anger, confrontation, grief. But I knew this much. I couldn't pretend anymore. The daughter I thought I knew was gone. And the woman I was before this moment, she was gone too. What remained was someone new. Someone who wouldn't stay silent. Because love, even broken, still demands truth. And that night, I promised myself I would find it. The next morning felt different. The house looked the same, sunlight slipping through the curtains, coffee brewing in the pot, but it no longer felt like mine. I moved through the rooms like a guest, seeing everything with new eyes. Every framed photo, every old note from my daughter felt like a lie I hadn't noticed before. I sat at the kitchen table again, the same one where I'd discovered everything, and just stared at my hands. They looked older than they did yesterday, tired, unsure, shaking slightly as I reached for the stack of mail I'd been avoiding. The envelopes came one after another. Bills, overdraft notices, letters from the bank. My stomach sank as I read them. My credit cards had been maxed out. My savings nearly drained. There were accounts I didn't even remember opening, all in my name. Every number, every line of text was a reminder that trust, once broken, doesn't just hurt. It costs. By noon, the phone rang, but when I answered, it was a collection agency asking for payment. Later, when I tried to make a call, the line was disconnected. I stood there, staring at the silent phone, and it hit me how fast everything can crumble. One day, you're just a mother paying bills and making dinner. The next, you're a woman realizing your own child has taken everything you built together. In the days that followed, the world grew smaller. The neighbors, who once waved from their driveways, started looking away. I could feel their curiosity, their whispers. Some said it must have been my fault, that I must have spoiled her, given her too much. Others pitied me in that quiet, uncomfortable way people do when they're glad it isn't happening to them. I stopped going to the grocery store during the day and started shopping late at night, when no one would see me. The loneliness was the hardest part. The house that once felt full of laughter now echoed with silence. I'd look at the couch where my daughter used to curl up to watch movies, or the corner where she helped me decorate the Christmas tree, and feel the ache of everything we lost. I kept asking myself how love could turn into this, how a mother's care could be twisted into opportunity for betrayal. But as the days stretched on, something inside me began to shift. Grief slowly hardened into resolve. I realized that silence was its own kind of surrender, and I'd already lost too much to give that up. 2. I started keeping notes, collecting papers, piecing together what she'd done, step by step. I wasn't ready to forgive, and I wasn't ready to forget. But I was ready to stop pretending I was powerless. And as I sat there one night, surrounded by documents and unpaid bills, I felt something I hadn't in weeks, a quiet spark of strength. Maybe I couldn't change what she'd done, but I could reclaim what was left of me. That was the night I decided this story wasn't going to end in silence. The next time I saw my daughter, I wouldn't be the broken one anymore.